Hello everybody, in this video I am going to be making a mixed media book cover for the Thompson's Craft Supplies design team using the AB Studio Shabby Love Symphony papers and going with a very shabby chic kind of theme. Now, the first 5 minutes or so, I think it's about 5.5 minutes of the video, is me making the book cover itself. So if you're familiar on how to do this and everything, then feel free to skip ahead. I think it's about 5 minutes 40-ish that the actual mixed media starts. But yeah, so what I'm doing here is making my base for the book cover. You could of course use like an old book cover where it's been gutted of its pages and just do mixed media on that, but I like to make my own sometimes. So out of some grey board, I'm cutting my front and back panels and spine. The front and back panels are about 7.5 inches tall by 5 3/4 wide, maybe slightly wider than that. I was kind of making a large B6 size because I love working in B6 size, but I don't like to make it a little bit bigger, so it's kind of somewhere between B6 and A5. And then my spine is just over 1.5, it's probably about 1 3/4 inches wide. And once those are all cut, I just take a very sharp pair of scissors and cut off any sort of rough edges and things. Then taking an A3 piece of white cardstock and measuring 1.5 inches in from the top and bottom. I did have to cut off just over 1/2 inch at the top there, and then place my panels in the middle to work out sort of where they're going to go and how far to each edge I'm going to make them go. So between each panel and the spine, you want to leave about 1/4 inch, maybe slightly less, because that means it's going to make the book actually able to bend. And I just marked with a pencil where exactly to put those down. And then I'm using some slow drying tacky glue to put these down. I think it's called Original High Tack. I usually have it linked in my Amazon storefront. But as I say every time, it is cheaper in store at the range if you can get there. So I put either side panel down first and then the spine down last, just so I can get that sort of right gap between all of the panels. Once they're down, I like to give them a couple of minutes to dry so they're not going to move around at all when I sort of do the flat bits over. I mark on each corner about 5mm to 1/4 inch. You can get a funny little gizmo to do that for you, but I just eyeball it. Cut off each corner like this. Then I do the long edges first, like so. So just fold them over, add a lot of glue, use my bone folder to make sure like all the folds and edges are like nice and secure and sharp and crisp and smooth and everything like that. And then just add my glue, hold it down in place again for a little while to make sure it's nice and dry, because as I said, it is slow drying tacky glue, but it is, I find, the best for this particular job. Then once the long edges are down and dry, I find this is one of the most important stages, which I didn't know what to do a few years ago when I started making these, but this is where you use your bone folder to kind of press and fold in those little edges at each corner, and this means that when you do the second load of flaps, you're not going to get an ugly little corner of grey board or chipboard sticking out. It is just not very attractive, so very important step, I find, and I think a lot of people don't know about it at first. I certainly didn't. Anyways, then, as I said, gluing down those flaps, I get still using my bone folder to make sure everything is pressed down and smooth. I usually go round the edges again, sort of with it, just kind of curving around the edges to make sure those edges are really, really nice and smooth and nothing's sticking up and looking ugly or anything like that. Then I'm going to cover up the middle part just with a scrap of cardstock. I tend to add glue around the edge of that piece of cardstock. I haven't measured it, I've just eyeballed it. Then glue to the grey board itself, then put it on like so. Then when it's completely dry, take the bone folder again and very gently just sort of crease those gaps, those lines where it's going to fold. If you press too hard, like I did just then, it's going to tear through. Now for me that doesn't matter, because once this journal is completely finished, those bits, you won't be able to see them anyway. But if you're doing it in a way that you're not going to add anything else to that bit, you need to be extra careful. Then again, making sure completely dry, you do your folding. If you do your folding before it's completely dry, then it tends to sort of lift up and you get unattractive gappy bits and stuff like that. So I'm adding my book closure or fastening at this very early stage. There's lots of different ways to do this. I decided for this one I wanted to have some really lovely lace ribbon or trim, so I've cut 2 lengths of it. I'm adding some very wide, very strong red line tape to each center like that, pressing it down with the bone folder and then adding the ribbon on, as you can see there. Then I take another scrap of paper. This is all going to be covered up, so it doesn't matter for me, at least, the sizes and everything. Add a load of glue to that and cover it up like so. Again, using the bone folder to press everything down, get it in place, and then repeating on the other side. I find it good with this. I always add the red line tape just for extra security. I think if you just put the ribbon down and then put the glued paper on top, it's just not secure enough. But anyways, with all that done, that is the book itself actually done. So now we can move on to the mixed media stage. So to do that, I am going to take this really beautiful paper from that AB Studio Shabby Love Symphony paper pack. I'm cutting 2 papers at 5.5 by 7.25, and then my spine, it needs to be 1.5 by 7.25, but because I had cut these 2 pieces, I didn't have enough of the paper left to make a 1.5-inch wide spine sort of thing, but I didn't want to cut into another paper just for that strip. So what I did is take another scrap. This is probably left over from either all the panels and things like that, and just cutting that to 1.5 by 7.25, going around the edges of it in Distress Oxide in Milled Lavender, which is a really nice colour to go with this collection and this paper pack. And then I'm going to have my 1-inch leftover strip from that original paper to put on top of that. And knowing that a ton of mixed media is going to go on that paper, I'm going to put it down on the cardstock with some red line tape just so it is super secure and isn't going to start lifting up when I start adding gesso and paints and stenciling and all that sort of thing. So first main step to do on the mixed media front is cover everything with a layer of clear gesso, just so the paper is much stronger. It's going to handle everything I'm going to throw at it, and also it kind of ever so slightly mutes the colours and stuff as well, which I think is really good for a shabby chic effect. Once that was about 95% dry, and then taking a distress tool to the edges of the papers, and the reason I did it when it wasn't completely 100% dry is because it distresses the edges slightly different. When it's ever so slightly damp, you get a different effect, rather than that sort of dry, scratchy distress. It's a bit more, I don't know how to describe it actually, maybe more natural or something. Anyways, but that did make some white bits appear, so I went around the edges of that again with that same milled lavender, so it was all matchy with the spine and everything. I'm doing some really basic stamping with some Kaisercraft stamps. There's a sort of scripty one, and then I'm going to go in with a butterfly one, using Stays On Stone Grey and then Stays On Dove Grey inks because they are alcohol-based sort of archival inks, so they're not going to react with all the water-based paints and other products I'm going to throw at these pages. It's really sort of light, subtle stamping. I didn't want too much being thrown at your face kind of thing. There's plenty going on in those papers. I just wanted to add a little bit of my own flair. I'm going to do some stenciling here. This stencil was in my kit, as was that impasto paint. I'm mixing it with a little bit of modelling paste. The impasto is actually thick enough to stencil with, but I just wanted it to be a little bit thicker because I wanted to really lay on that stenciling. So yeah, that's why I mixed it with the modelling paste. What I'm trying to do is everything I do to one page, I do to another, or the spine or whatever, in the same way. So, you know, I'm adding that rose stenciling on one side, so I add it on the spine on the other side as well. And then I had some leftover of that little mix I'd made, so I've just grabbed my junk journal and I'm just putting the leftover in there because, you know, then it's not going to waste or anything, and then I've got a page ready in my junk journal to use for another project. And there's me cleaning up, because I'm really funny about cleaning up things like modelling paste and stuff. It's because when it dries on, it's such a pain to get off. Anywho, after that bit of stenciling, I decided some more was needed. So this is a Tim Holtz very pretty flowery stencil. I'm using Prima paper paste for this, which again, shabby chic effect, so perfect for it. You could, like, I could have coloured it or gone over with it with some paint or inks later, but I just like the way it looks white. Actually, it is so very pretty. It didn't stencil perfectly on the back here, but it looks great on the spine, I think, personally. So from one of the cut aparts from that paper pack, I've cut out some tags. You can see 3 of them on the left there, which I thought I was going to use on either the front or back and then decided not to, but I will incorporate them into the book later on when I make the pages, which is not going to be in this video, by the way, in case you were wondering, because it's long enough as it is. I'll do the pages at a later date. But I did do a slightly larger one, went around the edges with Distress Oxide Victorian Velvet, and then put an eyelet in it as well, just, you know, nice bit of hardware. Then I grabbed this old doily from my stash, and I thought that would look really nice on the cover. I don't know how well you can see in the video, but there's actually slight hints of green and pink within the doily itself, so it just really matched that paper. So I've cut that into 3 pieces, so it's going on the front and back like so. I wanted to try and incorporate it onto the spine as well, but I couldn't make it work. It was looking too, I don't know, too blocky and a bit, just wasn't working. So here I'm going to start adding all the different elements and things. I've got flowers that were sent to me in my kit, as well as these lovely chipboard pieces, or grey board. I can never remember the difference between them, but you know, chippies as people call them. I'm using all sort of leaf-based chipboard pieces for that. And once I've decided on those, I'm just going to start adding everything together, gluing things down. Everything is going to go down with my usual Prima 3D gloss gel, and yeah, just layering things, trying to add that tag like on top of and slightly underneath the chipboard, adding a few flowers. I love that really, really big flower, and it's so very pretty. I just love it. And yes, just adding flowers here and there. And then I think once I'd done the flowers and everything on this side, I was like, well, I need to add something else to the spine and the back as well. What I was trying to be cautious of making this is not adding too much bulk, I suppose, to the spine and particularly to the back, because I feel like you've got to think about when this is going to be used. Like eventually down the line, when there's pages in it and you're going to want to hold it open and write in it, journal in it, creative art journal, whatever you do on it, if it's all bulky on the front, spine and back, it's very hard to do that. So that's what I was trying to keep in mind the whole time. Once that first layer of everything put down was dry, I'm painting the chipboard with some, I'm going to need my list here, that is Ducraft's Artiste Pearl Blush acrylic paint, so just a really pretty pearlescent pink, which once dry I thought, oh, it's a little bit too pink, so I go back and sort something out there. I'm going to add some of those glass beady cabochon things. I always think of them as the glass beady things you get in a fish tank, but they've probably got a better name than that. Also some pearlescent white resin flowers and some flat back pearls as well. So just adding those here and there and all over the place in little clusters around the leaves and around the tags and all that sort of thing. And then, oh, just one tiny little flower on the back, because I thought it looked a bit lonely without its own little flower. Then I'm just going to add little clumps of 3D gloss gel in some bits where there's like gaps between the embellishments, and then pour on some micro beads, which I don't know where these are from. I think they got sent to me in some Happy Mail or a previous kit or something like that. They're just pinky micro beads. And then to tone down the paint, which I wasn't loving at that stage, I'm using some Fabrica Decoro Shabby Velour paint in colour Heather, just stippling that on just to, yeah, tone down that really shiny in your face pearlescent pink. Then splatters, of course. This is there was a drying stage between that painting and microbeads and those splatters, by the way. So I've got splatters in the Fabrica Decor Shabby, not Shabby, I'm mixing everything up. Chalk spray in blue Shabby, then Distress Stain spray stain in Picket Fence, and then Distress Oxide spray in Victorian Velvet. Then I'm also adding the Victorian Velvet, like really heavy amounts on top of where those microbeads are, just so they're nice and coloured, because they'd gone a little bit transparent in the drying process. Then of course, some Nouveau drops. These are the vintage drops in Dusty Rose. I mostly got them out because the little flower on the back needed a centre, but then I just had to add a few more. So again, setting everything aside to dry, I'm going to go back to my book base and use oxides to colour the edges of it, so that when you put down the mixed media panels, then it's like you're not going to get that harsh white line around it, which I think it could look good in some circumstances, but was not going to look good in this circumstance. So I did Victorian Velvet around the edges and the front, and then the milled lavender around the inside as well. And I'm doing it very messily because you're only going to see about 1/4 of an inch of it either side. I am not going down the middle of the inside because, as I said towards the beginning of this video, that will eventually be covered up, but as I said, not in this video. I'm not going to do the pages and signatures and everything in this video just because I haven't got time, so I'm going to try and include that in a future studio vlog. So if you are interested in that stage, then look out for that. This is mostly about the mixed media itself, this video. So just adding some panels on the inside, so that's pretty too. They're about 4 inches wide, another paper from the AB Studio Shabby Love Symphony pack. Again, they're not very wide because they will be partly covered up. The way I do my spines and signatures is basically sort of sewn into material, so the material will be added to the inside of the book. I added Victorian velvet to the outside of those panels so they'd contrast with the milled lavender that was on the cover itself, or the inside of the cover. And now all that is left to do is glue down the mixed media pages to the front, the back and the spine. And for that I'm obviously using my beloved 3D gloss gel because they need to be really, really, really glued on, and I'm paying a lot of attention to the edges because obviously I don't want the edges to start sort of lifting up at all, but I also don't want the gel or the glue to come squirting out the sides or anything. So sort of dry brushing it but adding enough to stick it down. Obviously then the spine and then the front, and then it's all done really. I didn't really need to hold it down or put anything heavy on top of it to get them to stick down because the gloss gel, it takes hold pretty quickly. Just like some encouraging around the edges was needed to help hold it down, but other than that it was, yeah, it's pretty easy. So there we go, that is it. That is my Shabby Chic mixed media book cover using AB Studios Shabby Love Symphony paper pack, as well as lots of other goodies from Thompson's Craft Supplies, which I will link in the description box. And if there's anything else I've used as well, a couple of bits from my stash, I will try and link those too. So there we go. Thank you so very much for watching. This is a much longer video than usual. As I said, if you're interested in me doing the pages and everything on the inside of this journal, then I will include it in either next studio vlog or the one after. I'm not sure at this stage. Let me know if you have any questions. I will link to the corresponding blog post and all that kind of stuff. I think that's about it, and time for me to shut up. Please leave me a thumbs up, chat to me down in the comments. I am going. Thank you so much. Bye bye!